We've talked enough about all this new seasonal anime, so now it's time to dive back into the anime backlog. I need to do this more often because I'm realizing now that I'm adding more things to the list faster than I'm crossing them off. So, today let's talk about 3 shows that we're going to cross off on this episode of The Anime Hole. This bag is full of classic anime, shows that will help me understand the rich history of the medium, shows that defined a generation of anime fans in the West. So for today's first show, we're talking about a show from 2018, Skullface Bookseller Hondasan. Jokes aside, Hondasan is a show I really wanted to get to when it first aired, but I'm still sticking to my 3 new shows per season rule, so I saved it for later in the year. It's been quite a few months since I first watched it, but I still think about it every now and then. Partially because there's a new OVA that I still am on the hunt for, but also because it's a funny, relatable show. If you worked any retail or customer-facing job, you're immediately going to find some enjoyment in Hondasan. The show follows the titular Honda, his co-workers, and the day-to-day minutia that comes with working at a major Japanese bookstore. All the store employees are represented by some kind of mask, so no, Honda isn't actually a skeleton, Rabbit Head isn't actually a rabbit, etc. The manga Hondasan is adapted from is based off the author's actual experiences working at a bookstore. The goofy employee caricatures are just the author's way of basing characters off his co-workers without revealing their identities. Meaning, the comedy doesn't stem from a look at these supernatural characters living everyday lives, how silly kind of thing. It comes from everyday retail situations like foreigners asking you for help while not being able to speak their language, or the awkwardness of trying to explain yaoi doujinshi to a parent.
Sorry, we don't have this one. It's a special yaoi book!
Jesus Christ! What's yaoi book?
Boketsu.
The situations are funny on their own, but then you add on Honda's anxious inner thoughts and narration to really amplify that feeling. If you've worked retail before, you know what this feels like. Seeing a customer walk up to you with a specific look in their eye, dealing with the messes that are shift scheduling and keeping stock of inventory, things that all retail employees have stories about, good and bad. And that's the cool thing about Honda-san. It isn't a cynical look into the bad aspects of the job. Honda genuinely enjoys the work he does. He goes through some stress, but at the end of the day, he always finds the good in the situation. We get a nice laugh at some of the more arduous parts of the job, but we also come out the other end uplifted by Honda's attitude, and also learning a little bit on how it is to work at a Japanese bookstore. Seriously, the show goes out of its way to explain some of the workings of Japanese bookstores and the publishing industry. It's not even that long of a show. It had a 12-episode run, and each episode is about 12 minutes. Easy to put on during a quick break, have a chuckle, and then go back to stocking shelves. I recommend it, and hopefully I can find that OVA soon too. Anyway, I'm gonna get rid of this bag now because this bit was mostly just for Honda-san. The next show we're talking about is Nichijou. Still not a super old show, but one that feels like it's been around forever because of how many people reference it. Even if you don't actively watch anime, I feel like people have had at least some encounter with Nichijou just by being on the internet. That was basically my experience with the show for a while. We've all seen the deer clip. We've all seen the pencil clip. I had seen enough clips that I knew I would like the show when I eventually decided to watch it. But that eventually didn't come until Crunchyroll announced that their partnership with Funimation was ending, meaning Nichijou would be taken off the service. That's when I got my ass in gear and marathon through the series in about a week. And it pretty much lives up to all the praise it gets. I don't want to spend too much time explaining what Nichijou is because, well, it's Nichijou, but here's a quick primer for the few of you who don't know. The show is mostly a collection of events of our characters' everyday lives. That's where the title comes from. The thing is, their everyday lives tend to involve some sort of bizarre situation or just some really comical, extremely dramatized moments for a fairly mundane occurrence. There are a handful of characters we get to know throughout the series, but our main characters are Yuko, Mio, Mai, and Nano. Yuko is not the most book-smart person, but she lives her life in a blissful, easygoing fashion. Unfortunately, she also often tends to fall victim to some, well, unfortunate situations. Mio is Yuko's best friend. She's sweet, kind, and really cares for all her friends, but is also prone to emotional outbursts which stem from her often being the foil for Yuko's shenanigans or even her own mishaps involving her yaoi drawings. Then there's Nano, a robot who wants nothing more than to live the life of a normal girl. She lives with the professor, the 8-year-old child that built her, and Sakamoto, their talking cat. And finally, we have Mai. She's rarely the driving force of any of the individual skits, but I'm saving her for last because she's one of my favorite characters and the perfect example of why I enjoy Nichijou's overall sense of humor so much. Mai's whole deal is that she has a weird sense of humor and loves to fuck with her friends. And you know what? Hard same. Someone will appreciate that dumb joke. She always has this deadpan look on her face and comes up with these absurd gags to play on people, and she commits 100% to the bit. That's the embodiment of the show. Nichijou goes all in with its weird gags. That's what makes them so hilarious. Like when Mai decides to wear 2 pairs of glasses or slightly mispronounce a word on purpose, Nichijou's weird situations aren't necessarily that funny when you lay it all matter-of-factly. Yuko gets bitten by a dog, Mio tastes something gross, the girls try to break a pumpkin. But also like when Mai goes all the way to keep the bit going, Nichijou's staunch commitment to the joke elevates these moments to top-tier comedy levels that are exactly my kind of humor. Nothing is a clearer example of this commitment than how Nichijou is animated. It's a Kyoto animation show, and I've mentioned before how I haven't seen many KyoAni productions. Nichijou is my 4th, and it felt different than the ones I've seen before. I've talked about this a little last year when I watched Tsurune. The KyoAni shows I've seen have so much detail in every little thing. Lighting, scenery, characters, and facial expressions. Nichijou doesn't have that detail in the same way. It has a very cartoonish style, bold lines, strong solid colors, not much shading and depth. But that simple look lends itself so well to the tone of the show. All of that KyoAni detail instead goes into making the incredible over-the-top sequences for the show's gags. Animating all these things as if they have the same weight as some world-ending situation is the kind of commitment for a joke that I love. That's really all I want to say about Nichijou. It feels like such a pillar in most people's anime knowledge that I don't think I need to say much more besides I'm glad I finally watched all of it. Speaking of things that I don't want to talk too in depth on because everyone has done that ad infinitum already, let's talk about my first time watching Neon Genesis Evangelion. Okay, with Evangelion making its way to Netflix, it's now widely accessible to people who have never gotten a chance to see the show. I'm in that group. I watched it with subtitles and Japanese audio. Because of that, and the fact that I have zero attachment to the original dub, I am not going to get into all the hubbub about translation differences. I'm also not going to try to break down the symbolism of every little thing and all that jazz. I have done both of those things at length elsewhere, and so have countless other people. For this segment, I'm just going to talk about how I feel about the show after finishing it and End of Evangelion. The short version is that I think Eva is fine. I like it enough, I don't love it, and that's okay. The longer version is, of course, a bit more nuanced. I went into Eva with the same expectations I would have gone into any other show with. The years of people saying how important Eva was didn't really faze me. I was ready to watch Eva, take it as it is, and form my own thoughts on it. But that doesn't mean there wasn't something influencing my experience though. Watching Eva this far removed from its original air date means I've already consumed a lot of works that were influenced by it. And in my case, the one that I kept going back to was Darling in the Franxx. The ongoing joke on Discord while we were all watching the show was that Franxx made me hate Eva, which of course isn't true. I don't hate Eva, but I do like Franxx more. I know that's an insane thing for a lot of people to hear, so before I unpack that hot take, let me just get into the specifics on how I feel about Eva first. I like a lot of what Evangelion tries to do, I just don't think it succeeds as much as I would have liked it to. The first few episodes really intrigued me with their setup. In those episodes, Evangelion does the kind of world building that I really enjoy. The kind where the show just goes all in and says things about the state of the world as if everyone understands what's being said. The viewers are left to ruminate on these things and try to piece together what they mean. The problem is that I think that only works if the show eventually wraps back around to confirm or deny those viewers' theories. Eva doesn't do that enough. That world building and lore gets pushed to the sidelines after the first few episodes. I started getting kind of bored during this part of the show, honestly. It wasn't until around episode 15 or 16 that Eva started reeling me back in. This is because Eva starts to shift gears around this point to focus on another thing I really like. It starts to focus its story more on the mental state of its characters. It becomes a deeper exploration of depression and mental health than it led on to be at the outset. But that shift feels pretty abrupt. Abrupt in a way that makes me think, like the lore aspects of the show, Eva doesn't do enough with this look into the human condition. Or rather, it doesn't give it enough time to be as effective as I think it could be. That's the main thing that keeps me from loving Eva the way other people seem to. Those two aspects of the show are both things I love to see in media, but in Eva's case, those themes don't cohere seamlessly. If the show tackled both of these things equally from the get-go, I bet I would feel differently. In fact, it's because of that separation that I enjoy the endings of the show more so than the show itself. Episodes 25 and 26 are great. I definitely took notice of the things that seemed to be results of production issues, but I think the team made it work with what they had. A deep look into Shinji's psyche like in these episodes is something I would have totally eaten up if it was explored more during the entire series. The same goes for End of Evangelion. It does for the lore what the series end does for the themes of mental health and emotional turmoil. And together, I think they make for a really good ending, which is what leads me into the things I said about Franks at the top of this segment. Franks is kind of the complete opposite of Eva. Eva tries to tackle a lot, and maybe it doesn't get all the way there in places, but I appreciate its ambition and really enjoy how it wraps up. Franks, on the other hand, doesn't have that ambition. It's not a grand look into the mental health of its characters. It's more focused on tackling a smaller scale topic, the feelings of growing up and escaping from the role society has placed on you. Franks tackles its main themes throughout the entire run of the show, as well as tying it all into the interesting world building it sets up, and I think it does this very well, up to a point. What I don't like about Franks is the ending. Unlike Ava's ending, Franks's is a huge bummer. It throws all the stuff that came before it out the window for a completely out of left field twist and a final message that rings really hollow. But the things I like about Franks are in spite of its ending. Because I enjoyed the lead up to that final trash fire so much, it doesn't spoil the entire thing for me. Whereas in Ava, the lead up started to feel like a slog until the show became something more. And when it finally does become something more, it doesn't quite resonate with me all the way. That's my blasphemous Ava take. Franks didn't make me hate Ava, as I mentioned I joked about a lot with other people. But I do think that time gap between its original airing did make a difference. More life experience, more experience with post-Ava media, it all had an effect of shaping my feelings of the show. For some people, this was their first experience with a piece of media exploring themes of depression and humanity that affected them deeply. It isn't mine. I've experienced that already, multiple times. The one that most prominently comes to mind isn't even one of my first, it's one of my most recent. It's Nier Automata.
I feel like I'm losing hope in my body and my soul and the sky. It looks so ominous.
Without spoiling it, I can say that Ava and Nier have similar messages, and I came to the realization that the way I feel about Nier is the way a lot of people felt about Ava in their first viewing. Right down to the part where people say to power through the first parts of Ava because it's worth it. I've literally said pretty much that exact same thing about Nier. So Ava didn't connect with me the way other things have. But I still appreciate it. I appreciate it for paving the way for other things I love. I appreciate it as a piece of work that clearly shows its creator working through some shit. If anything, maybe that's the thing I like the most about Ava. I know what it feels like to be dealing with your own mess and just wanting to pour that energy into making something. And sometimes that something doesn't quite feel fully formed by the end, but you made it. You worked through your shit, or at least you came closer to working through it. And that feels good. But I'm calling it there. I think that's a good place to end it. I've been talking about Ava for like 3 weeks now. I've explored these thoughts and many others many times with other people because we've just been chatting on Discord about Ava. And that will continue because I'm now watching the rebuilds. I'm not gonna go into that too much here, but like how I enjoy the endings of the series more so than the show itself, I enjoy these rebuilds more than the show too. They lack the deep introspection that the later half of the series has, which is a bummer, but they go all in on the world state stuff and it's wild. It feels more focused. Also, Ano just seems to be fucking with people now, and I'm totally here for that. 3.33 fucking rocks. Oh no, I've tried to end this video and I'm still talking about Ava. Okay, streaming links are in the description as usual, so is my AniList. Go follow me or something. That's it. No more Ava. Goodbye. Thanks for watching.